Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to East Central Missouri and the world, and welcome to the James Strong Show podcast number 375. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for making us a part of your day. I appreciate it. This podcast was recorded on the afternoon of Thursday, September the 19th, from the James Strong Studio in Western St. Charles County. Back from the trip. It was a wonderful trip, that the White Mountain Peak adventure that me and number 3 son went on actually last week. Got back early this week. And it was a trip that had been planned for a long, long time. It had probably been 10 years since I had climbed White Mountain Peak. How tall is it? 14,252 feet. I mean, it's a tall mountain, okay? And the reason for going out there was to have an adventure, spend time in the wilderness with my son, and climb the mountain. And we surely had a great time. It was wonderful. It's a part of the country that there's a real good chance that no one listening to the sound of my voice has ever been to. And the reason I say that is because it's real hard to get there. I mean, it's super hard to get there. Put it this way. We camped at a place called Grandview Campground, which is in the middle of nowhere and has no water, has no facilities. It's a campground with a pit toilet. That's about it. And you're an hour and a half from the trailhead by vehicle, by dirt road, rock road, terrible road. It's so hard to get to that, again, chances are nobody listening to the sound of my voice has ever been there, nor will you ever go there, because it's just so hard to get to. But White Mountain Peak Adventure, that's the topic of today's podcast. But before we get to that, a couple of things in the news that I wanted to touch on. And one of them, because I was spending times on airplanes last week and into this week, because we flew from St. Louis to Las Vegas. Airplanes have been in the news. In fact, there was a Cape Air flight that landed at Logan Airport in Boston, landed on one wheel. Now, Cape Air may sound familiar to you folks, because if you've ever gone through Lambert Field, Cape Air does operate out of Lambert Field. And it's a little bitty... it's a niche aircraft. They don't have jets. They have planes. They might have a jet or two, but I think mainly they have planes that carry anywhere from maybe 5 to 12 people. And they go to places like, I think from St. Louis, they have flights to Cape Girardeau, Fort Leonard Wood, Joplin, places like that. Okay. So they're a little niche airline, and they had a problem flying into Logan Airport, whereas only one wheel came down. And this was, when was this? 2 days ago, I think. And the pilot miraculously landed it. Now, did he scratch up the wing? Sure. Was there a problem? Yeah. Is that plane ever going to fly again? Don't know. But the skill of these pilots is just unbelievably incredible. I mean, if you think about what they're doing, there's zero room for error almost ever as they're doing their job. And how would you like to be a pilot with people on board and, hey, look, one of my wheels only came down. The other one, not so much. The guy nailed it. Nobody was hurt. Everybody walked off of the plane. You hear a lot of times people saying, the Boeing aircraft are falling out of the sky, which is an exaggeration. They're not falling out of the sky. They've had quality problems. In fact, I touched on that in a podcast a couple podcasts ago. I think one of the biggest problems, in my opinion, was, and this is a stickler of mine, the CEO of Boeing, who is gone now, most of the time he just worked from home. Translation, he never walked the shop floor. And how you can run a corporation, I don't care how big it is, how you can run a corporation, a manufacturing corporation, and never walk the shop floor. I do not have an MBA, okay? So maybe I don't know what I'm talking about, but I worked in manufacturing for a long, long time, almost 50 years. And I'm here to tell you that the way you find out what's going on with manufacturing is you walk the floor, you look at things, you talk to people, okay? And this guy did Zoom calls from his spare bedroom, okay? That is why Boeing is having problems in my opinion. But even that being said, aircraft flight or air flight it's so safe. It really is. And the problems they've had with Boeing, recently, nobody's been killed. I don't know if anyone's even been hurt in the last year or two, but they'll get it figured out. The reason for me bringing this up is it's kind of a man bites dog thing when there's a problem with an aircraft. I mean, tens of thousands of aircraft take off and land every day with absolutely no problems. I have flown thousands of times. I have no idea how many times. I wouldn't even hazard to count. Thousands of times I've flown. And the biggest problems are delays, okay? And a lot of times you get upset. Yeah, there's something going on here. We need a part, so it's going to be a 3-hour delay. Okay, well, you want to not go with the part? I mean, you want to go ahead and take the risk and hopefully not fall out of the sky? There are safety valves in place to make sure this stuff doesn't happen. And those of you who don't like to fly, consider this. It took, from the time we took off to the time we landed, it took under 3 hours to get to Las Vegas. If you're driving a car, it takes 3 days. All right. I guess you could do it in 2 if you really want to beat your head against the wall. But less than 3 hours, folks. And this round trip ticket was $313 on Southwest. They had a sale, all right, which is a cheap ticket. So certainly automobiles have gotten us closer to doing what we want to do. But aircraft, my friends, the world is your oyster. Also in the news, big time deals going on in Israel. And I'm here to tell you, and I don't like to get political, and I wouldn't say this is really political, but some of you may think that it is. I may offend some of you folks. That's certainly not my intention. But basically, all this stuff going on in the Middle East, I mean, I'm going to simplify it all for you, okay? If you look at a map of the Middle East, you've got all these Arab countries, most of which either tolerate or hate Israel. Then you've got Israel, which, by the way, is the most progressive economy in the area. Now, some of the Arab countries are richer, but they don't treat their people very well, okay? Israel is a free country. They have Arabs in the legislature. There is no Arab country that has Jews in the legislature. In fact, I'm not sure that there's only a handful of Arab countries that even elect people. They're ran by sheiks and kings and princes and emirs, et cetera, et cetera. But if Israel recently blew up pagers and then they blew up radios that Hamas was using to, was it Hamas or Hezbollah? I think it was Hezbollah. I may have Hezbollah. They're the guys, the Iranian proxies in the north. Hamas are the Iranian proxies in the Gaza Strip. But Hezbollah, they don't want to use cell phones because they're afraid that they'd give away the location. So they use pagers and radios. Well, apparently the Israeli intelligence they intercepted these radios and pagers. And they intercepted them, put bombs in them, sent them back to Hezbollah, and blew them all up. And it depends on which source you read. Some say 14, some say 18, some say 24 people are dead. Injured are in the thousands. And Hezbollah says, why, that's just an act of war. Friends, there's been a war going on there for a long time. And I will say this to Hezbollah or to Hamas and to the Palestinian Authority, all of you people. You want to stop the war with Israel? It's real simple. Simply take away from your charter the fact that you want to kill all the Jews and run Israel destroy Israel from, from the river to the sea. That's where they want to get rid of Israel. That's from the Jordan River to the Mediterranean Sea. That's what they want to do. You cannot negotiate with a group of people who say, you know what, we want to kill you all. Because the negotiation is what? Maybe don't kill all of us, just kill half of us. So we'll meet you halfway. No, you can't do that. Hezbollah, Hamas, you want peace? Just say you're not going to kill the Jews. In the meantime, it's game on. I don't like that. I wish they'd do something different, but it's the way it is. And I think we're in for a lot longer war in the Middle East. It looks like Israel is probably going to invade Lebanon again because Hezbollah is the big dog in Lebanon. I mean, their army is bigger than the Lebanese army. So the government in Lebanon really isn't in charge. Hezbollah is, even though a whole lot of the people, especially in the north in Lebanon, don't like Hezbollah. Doesn't matter. They're the strong man. So lots going on over there in that part of the country. And we are truly blessed in this part of the country that we don't have that mess to fool with. So best of luck to the Israelis. That's my opinion. Don't like it? Sorry. Okay, let's go on with the topic of today's podcast, the White Mountain Peak Adventure. This was something I'd planned for a long time. And those of you who listen to the podcast know that I had a problem. Some time ago, in fact, this is going on about a year. I had a big time problem with my foot. I was having trouble walking. So I went to my sports medicine guys and the guy I've gone to many times before. I've had a history of plantar fasciitis problems. So he does this, gives me exercises. I do a few things. I get better. Didn't happen this time. Okay. So finally he diagnosed it again. Said, you got a tear in your tendon in your heel. So he stabilized me in a boot. Then I got out of the boot, did my therapy, got better, and went to the gym. Just all I could. Got into shape. I'm ready for the climb. So here we are, leaving for the White Mountain Peak climb and ready to go. And we left actually on, what was it, a week ago Wednesday? And what date was that? I'd just say a week ago Wednesday. We left on a Wednesday, came back this last Sunday. But in fact, it was Monday by the time we got home because it was a late flight that was delayed. But that's what happens when you leave late. Cross-country flights that leave in the late afternoon or early evening historically are late because the error builds as you go along. So what is White Mountain Peak, you may ask? White Mountain Peak is a mountain in the White Mountains, naturally. Where are the White Mountains? It's across the Owens Valley from the Sierras. So as you're going from west to east, you hit the Sierra Nevada. Okay, that's Mount Whitney and all those beautiful White Mountain peaks. You then hit the Owens Valley. Okay, and the next set of mountains are the White Mountains. And the White Mountains are almost as tall as the Sierras, but they're not craggy and full of snow most of the time, mainly because they're older mountains, they're smoother mountains, and they get almost no moisture because the Sierras have taken all that moisture. So by the time the wet air gets to the White Mountains, it's not wet anymore. In fact, the White Mountain Wilderness is some of the driest, lowest humidity places on Earth. Okay, usually, humidity is in the single digits. It's a desert and it's very low humidity. But 14,252 feet, that's the height of White Mountain Peak. Mount Whitney, 14,505. So what? 250 feet shy of Mount Whitney. So it's quite a peak. It's quite a climb. And it's hard to get to, at least the last part. The way we did is we flew from St. Louis to Las Vegas, and knowing that we had to acclimate, because for me, I should say, as a flatlander, and most flatlanders, I mean, I live at 500 feet. When you get to altitude, if you're not careful, you get altitude sickness. So we had to acclimate. We packed. I packed the tent. I packed clothes. I packed my hiking sticks. I packed a little pad for me to sleep on. I packed the stove that we had to buy fuel for to cook the food. And I put that all in my duffel bag with wheels. And I also took along my my Pelican cooler. It's a big cooler, one of those coolers where you throw ice in it and it lasts for a week, okay? And it's got wheels, so it's easy to haul from point A to point B. My MO is I put my clothes in the Pelican cooler. If you pack the Pelican cooler with clothes, it weighs between 47 and 49 pounds. Southwest Airlines lets you take 50 pounds on board. So I'm right there. And I was at 49 pounds when I checked it in. So I was right at the peak. Okay. I've had to take stuff out of the cooler, put it in the duffel, or even into my backpack if I've been too heavy sometimes, but we didn't. I've done this so many times that I've not gone over in a long time. So everything was packed. Flying to Las Vegas without problems. Everything was on time because we flew early in the morning. And just a footnote, if you don't want flight delays, friends, fly early in the morning. 6:55 flights don't get delayed, okay? Because usually the plane is there from the night before waiting for you. 6:55 p.m. planes are usually delayed because that's about sometimes the third, fourth, or fifth place that plane had to be, all right? Translation, if you had one 15-minute delay someplace else, you're screwed because you're not going to be on time. So you get an early morning flight in, guaranteed to be there, almost guaranteed to be there on time. Evening flight on the way out, almost guaranteed to be a little bit late. So we were on time, right on time. I have had problems in the past recently with renting cars, going off-road and getting flat tires. I don't know if the rental car companies are going with cheaper tires. Maybe everybody's going with cheaper tires. Maybe you shouldn't be running cars off of the pavement anyway. But I've been going with a truck, okay? Trucks have better tires. They have higher clearance. They cost a little more, but you know what? A little bit less aggravation. So this time we rented a truck, a GMC Canyon or similar. So small or mid-sized truck is what we rented. Got to Enterprise, and there was one lady by herself, and the computers didn't work right. So I'm thinking, wow, we're going to be delayed here. But it worked to our advantage because she said, I'm sorry, we don't have any trucks. Would you like to take a full-size SUV instead? Okay, let's see what they got. Well, they had a big monster Jeep Wagoneer, which had high clearance, 3,600 miles, good Bridgestone tires, so we grabbed it. And I've rented these before. I think this is the third time I've rented one of these. And friends, they're beautiful vehicles. They're comfortable, they're roomy, they're quiet. I've never been in a vehicle that's it rides like a Cadillac. So why were they at a rental car company? Well, first of all, they go for close to $100,000. They're expensive vehicles. And they're not as reliable as they could be. In fact, every time we've had one, there's been problems with the electrics. Things just don't work the way you think they should work. The door locks when you didn't think it should have locked. So you better make sure you have your keys in your pocket. Things just, the heater controls don't work right. The buttons to open the hatchback sometimes work and sometimes don't. It's just quirky. And when you spend that kind of money for a vehicle, you don't want quirks. Okay. Bottom line is they cost like an Escalade. They look like an Escalade. They ride like an Escalade, but they don't perform like an Escalade. So nobody buys them. In fact, I think this is the last year they're going to be making these things, but they're beautiful vehicles. And if you're renting something, sure, they're great. They're fantastic. In fact, if you ever get a chance to rent a Jeep Wagoneer or a Grand Wagoneer, take advantage of it because it's a wonderful vehicle. Big V8. Got about 17 miles to the gallon, which is as big as that car was, and as much off-road as we took it, no complaints. So we loaded that thing up, and we headed to Bishop, California. Before we did that, though, we stopped and had the quintessential necessary meal at Peppermill Restaurant. I've mentioned this before, but to those of you who've never been to Peppermill Restaurant in Las Vegas, try it. It's the best breakfast you're ever going to get when it comes to standard breakfast. Okay. But you're going to pay for it. I mean, lots of movies were filmed there. It's kind of high on the strip, kind of near, if you remember where the old Riviera used to be, it's just south of the new Fontainebleau, convention center. It's kind of across the street and a little south from the Stratosphere. Okay, it's great food, great atmosphere. Many movies have been filmed there in Las Vegas. Movies, I think Cotton Club was filmed there. Casino was filmed there. If you walk into the place, you'll recognize it immediately. The only disadvantage to that place is I had eggs, bacon, hash browns, toast, cup of coffee. My son had similar, okay? With taxes and tip, the bill was $60. Okay, that's for breakfast, okay? Now, those of you who think, well, you should have just gone to Denny's and got a $2.99 Grand Slam. Well, first of all, the Grand Slams aren't $2.99. I think they're more like $12.99. But this thing puts the Grand Slam to shame. And it's very cool, very good atmosphere. So you're on vacation, what the heck? So we had breakfast at Peppermill. And if you have breakfast at Peppermill, friends, you don't have to have lunch because it's going to fill you up until dinner time, and it certainly did. So we drove to Bishop, and we went through Death Valley. We went through past the Creech Air Force Base, right there on US 95. Creech Air Force Base is where they run the drones, and we saw a drone or two taking off. And when I say run the drones, I mean that's the command center. I mean, if the U.S. government is going to send a drone to take out a bunch of Taliban who have infiltrated Iraq, chances are the guy driving that drone is sitting right there at Creech Air Force Base. That's just how things are done nowadays. But it's a very cool place. It's I've seen protesters outside of that place. I've seen drones taking off and landing. It's super high tech, and you're not allowed in there, but you drive right past there on the highway on US 95 as you're going to probably about 45 miles outside of Las Vegas. So that's always an adventure. Getting there, we decided to go through Death Valley, just because I love Death Valley. It's a wonderful place. I get warm fuzzies just driving through Death Valley. How hot was it in Death Valley? I think got up to 111. Okay. Then it was 110 for a long time. We dropped through the valley itself. It bumped up to 111, then went back to 110. But just beautiful again this time of year. Usually it's just fried and nothing's alive there. But they've had so much rain, there was still greenery around Death Valley. And greenery in Death Valley in September just doesn't happen. So I guess that's from all the rain that they had earlier in the year. But then we got to Bishop, California. You go through Death Valley, 190 to, 395. There may be one other highway that you go in there. You go past Cerro Gordo, you go past Keeler, you go into Lone Pine, then up 395 through Big Pine and Independence, and then into Bishop, California, which is in the northern end of the Owens Valley. The reason we went there is because our attempt at acclimation. Bishop sits at a little more than 5,000 feet, so we went from flatland country to spending a night at 5,000 feet. And I find that as I get older, I'm more sensitive to the altitude. In fact, I had a little bit of, I'm not going to call it altitude sickness, but I was a little bit lightheaded, okay, there in Bishop that first night. But that's okay. It's part of the acclimation process. We weren't going to do a whole lot. The main thing, when we stayed at a Motel 6, which California hotels are expensive, especially in that part of California. Bishop is a lot of people who are doing mountain climbs, they acclimate there. Just north of there is Mammoth Lake, so there's a lot of hunting, fishing, and camping, so a lot of people go through there. It's a beautiful town. A lot of people from the Bay Area go there just for the weekend, and a lot of retirees kind of live there, okay? But it's a good place to acclimate. Motel 6 was the cheapest hotel they had in the town. $160 a night. That's just what it costs, okay? And with a Motel 6, you get about what you think. What does Tom Bodette say? A clean, comfortable room with a comfortable bed. That's what you get. No more, no less. The big restaurant there, I mean, they have some chain restaurants, but There's a restaurant called Eric Shots, Shats. Looks like Shats, but it's pronounced Shots. In fact, we were told that don't say Shats; they'll be offended. It's not Shats like you're taking a shat. It's shot, Shat. Uh, Maybe the O ought to be an A. I think they're Dutch, so it's a Dutch word. But they've got some of the best pastries you're ever going to want to have. I can't tell you how many Danish and turnovers and strudels and they had these pastries. I don't know, with big long German names to them. They were just wonderful and outstanding. Every time we walked past the place, we stepped in and got a cup of coffee and some type of a sweet something or another. And we ate dinner at there's a Schatz Roadhouse just a few blocks south of there. So we the time we spent there, we had our lunches and dinners at Schatz Roadhouse and our breakfasts there at the bakery. So plenty to eat in Bishop, California. After we spent the night there, we went to a Vaughn's to buy our supplies for the camping trip. Vaughn's is kind of like a Schnucks or a Dierberg's. Okay, they're owned by the Albertson chain. We found everything we needed up there, including a big block of ice to throw in the cooler, except for we couldn't find a little propane tank to cook our food. I'm used to getting those at Walmart, and you can get them at Walmart for about $5, okay, $4 or $5. But we had to go to a independent camping store, $15. Okay, so instead of $5, I paid $15. But you know what? It's the only place I could find. We had to cook food, so I bought it. We threw it in, and the next day we headed up to Grandview Campground. Grandview Campground. It's about 45, 50 minutes away from Bishop. You drive up into the White Mountains, and it's a little over 8,000 feet. Again, trying to acclimate. So we bought our supplies, did our thing, drove up to the Grandview Campground. The Grandview Campground is wilderness camping. In other words, there's no electricity, there's no water, there's no sewers, there's no trash. So you got to, if you bring it in, you got to take it out. They have pit toilets, which were actually quite clean, but they also had a lot of wind up there. So when we got there and tried to pitch the tent, my son pitched his over in the trees. I wanted to get mine away from the trees. I didn't want to mess with the pine needles. But I could not pitch my tent. It was too windy, like 40-mile-an-hour winds. And every time I tried to pitch my tent, it'd blow it away and get everything tangled up. So he moved his over. I got mine in the trees. He helped me out. So we got the tent set up. The wind did not dissipate. So we had trouble cooking dinner, but we cooked it. Finally, made a fire break with the Wagoneer, put that up on a cooler. We made it, stood around it, enough of a fire break to get the fire started, then cooked our food. We ate. We hung around for a little while, tired, went to bed. With all the wind, the tent was full of dust and dirt and debris, so we got to sleep in the dust, but that's what you get in the desert. The wind stayed strong much of the night. Later on in the night, it settled down, and we were able to get to sleep. It's hard to sleep with the wind rattling, the dust coming in, and the not knowing if the tent's going to blow away. First night was tough. It was just tough. But we woke up the next morning for breakfast. The wind had died down, but it was cold. It got down in the 40s. Okay, and it was quite cold if you're just there by yourself in a sleeping bag. I mean, you can hunker down in the sleeping bag and stay pretty warm, but you don't want to pop your head out. And those of you that are older, like me, understand that sometimes you need to, nature calls in the middle of the night, and you can only put that off so long. Then you got to just say, the heck with it. Go out in the cold, do your thing, and then hunker back down into the sleeping bag and stay warm. So that's kind of what I did. But again, acclimation is what this was all about. And that first night at Grandview, I had a little bit of altitude sickness, kind of a lightheadedness. Okay. Almost like you need to drink water because you feel lightheaded, but you're drinking so much water, you know, you've drank at least enough, maybe too much. The next day, then, our goal was to go to the ancient bristlecone pine forest, which is at 10,000 feet. Okay. Again, spend the day at 10,000, then go back down to 8,000 to sleep. Okay. And getting up to the ancient bristlecone pine forest, I wasn't really sick anymore. I felt fine. I'd been at altitude long enough. We took a 4-mile hike through the ancient bristlecone pine forest, which has trees. Friends, some of these trees are 4,800 years old. 4,800 years old. In other words, these trees were already 2,800 years old when Christ walked the earth. They're old trees. And it's just, there's no place else on earth with just so many of these. And it has to do with the fact that the soil is terrible. The wind is awful. The weather is cold. You don't get much rain. And there's really nothing else that grows up here except for those trees. And the soil is awful. It's dolomite, they call it. It's just a rock. Basically, these things grow in rocks in a gravel pit. But they survive, and it was wonderful. Not a ton of people there, and we were very lucky to have a ranger there who liked to talk. And we spent hour or two talking to her. She was a forestry ranger, and she actually was from the Bay Area, and lived in Bishop. I think when she said she lived in Bishop, they said they have a place for them to stay. So I think the Forestry Service maybe rents apartments and these folks stay in there. But this lady, her name was Dana, that's what it said on her name tag, was really quite the outdoors woman. And basically she says, yeah, I got a place in Bishop, but about 4 nights a week, I just sleep in my truck. I go someplace and I camp out. Apparently her brother had bought her a porta potty, so she's got her own porta potty. She has a bed in the back of her truck, and she camps out half the time and gets up and comes to work, then goes back to camping. So she knew the area very well, and she told us a lot of things that we'd have never known unless she had told us. One of those things was the road up to White Mountain Peak. Right there at the ancient bristlecone pine forest, the pavement runs out and you have rock. And it said it takes an hour to get there on the dirt road. And they say, take it easy, take your full hour. She said, take it easier than that and take an hour and a half. I said, well, why? She said, because the road's terrible. It's awful. It's sharp rocks. And she said on 4th of July weekend, we had a lot of people going up there. She said 20 people had flat tires on that dirt road. And think about this. I said, well, what do people do? Because there's no cell service up there. She says, she changed the flat tire. I said, well, can you call a wrecker? She said, there's no cell service. You can come down here and call a wrecker, and they'll charge $1,000 to come up and change your tire. $1,000. And they probably won't come till the next day. All right. And consider this. If the road is rough enough and the rocks are sharp enough to pop tires, how would you like to lay in it and change a tire? So that made us worried too, especially me. We thanked Dana for her advice. We went back to camp, had a nice dinner, woke up the next morning, got off to camp, or woke up a little late. That was more me than my son because I had trouble sleeping. I slept well from about 9 to 1. Then I woke up at 1, couldn't go back to sleep. And about 5 o'clock in the morning, I finally fell back asleep. Well, I slept till 6. Should have been up before 6, so I overslept. We had our breakfast. We had our coffee. Our goal was to then drive up, climb the mountain, come back to camp, break camp, go down to Bishop, spend the night in Bishop. We left camp late, which meant we got up to the mountain late. And it says it takes an hour, actually maybe 40 minutes to the ancient bristlecone pine forest, and another hour to up to the peak, or the trailhead, I should say. It took longer than that. We took about an hour and 40 minutes to get up there. Okay. So now we're at the trailhead a lot later than we wanted to be, but that's okay. We're hiking. We're doing our thing. The hike was good. The weather was fine. It was windy. It was cold, but we were dressed for it. So it was fine. And, surprisingly, I did surprisingly well. I mean, my foot never bothered me. I had plenty of wind. I had my trekking poles to help me up the hill. We got about 3/4 of the way up, stopped for a rest, and then started looking at the clock, thinking, okay, at the pace we're going, because we were both getting tired and we're having to rest a little bit more than we had earlier. At the pace we were going to make it to the top and make it down, and we'd probably get to camp about dark. So we'd be breaking camp at dark with no lights. Sure, flashlights, that type of thing. But then getting to Bishop when dinner's probably over, okay? So we get McDonald's for dinner. At that point, we said, you know what? Enough is enough. Let's pull the plug. Let's get back to camp. So we did that. We turned around, we came back, and did not summit the peak, but still had a wonderful hike. We saw things that, again, probably there's a good chance nobody listening to the sound of my voice has ever seen any of this stuff, because it's so remote. It's so desolate. It's so hard to get to. It's and the White Mountain Wilderness is almost like moonscape once you get above the tree line, and the trailhead starts above the tree line. And what does one do up there? Well, we saw a guy with camouflage gear with a gun. I mean, he was going up there to hunt, bighorn sheep. That's the type of thing that's done up there. But so we didn't make the peak, but we came back. We broke camp. We went to Bishop, had a good meal, and had a great time. Got up the next morning, drove to Las Vegas, had a good time in Las Vegas. Went to Lowry's, the Prime Rib, for dinner. Had a nice cocktail, had a good dinner. Came back to the hotel about 9, and number one son wanted to go explore the strip. He's a young man. I'm an old man. I said, knock yourself out. He went and did his thing, and I was in bed by 10. So that was the exciting trip. I mean, coming back, flight delays. Actually, we didn't have any delays at the airport, but we did have flight delays coming back, because you got like a 6:55 flight p.m. coming home. You're going to have delays. We did. Didn't get home till well after 1 in the morning, closer to 2 in the morning, and took a shower, out like a rock. But that's it. It was a wonderful adventure, and I've said this 100 times, and I'll keep saying it. We have just one world, and we just have one life. So try your best, dear listeners, to have the adventure of a lifetime 3 times a year. Now, do you have to go off into the wilderness and hike and haul your food in and brave the wind and sleep on the ground and poop in the pit toilets? No, you don't have to do that. If that's not your thing, don't do it. But think of what you'd want to do. Think of what you'd like to do. Think of what you've always wanted to do, but never really had the time, the gumption, the whatever. Really consider doing it, because the day will come when you can't. And you'll think back and, wow, I wish I shoulda, coulda, woulda. Dear listeners, never have a shoulda, coulda, woulda in your life. Do it. At least try it. You may say to yourself, yeah, Strong, you're running your pie hole and you didn't even finish the hike. You didn't even climb the peak. That's true, but that's okay. It's okay if you don't finish the hike. It's okay if you didn't make it to the peak, because we saw things that we'd have never seen unless we did it. And I'm very fortunate, because I got to do it with my son. And how cool is that? Okay. He had a good time too. I mean, the day's going to come where I can't do that kind of stuff. And, he'll just be visiting me in a nursing home when I won't even remember his name, but we're not there yet. Okay. And, we had a good time together. It was the adventure of a lifetime. I say 3 times a year. I think this is my 4th this year. And, I've got one more planned. Next month, I'm climbing another 14er in Colorado, with the Mad Dog. So, the adventures continue. And I would highly recommend, dear listeners, that you too do your best to have adventures. And it may be driving to Branson for the weekend. That's fine. That's an adventure. If that's what you want to do, it doesn't make it right or wrong. You don't have to go to San Tropez and stay in a suite that's going to cost you $1 million. You don't have to do that. Just do something different. Do something out of the ordinary. Go to a fishing hole you've never been to. I've always wanted to go fishing in this creek. Do it. Do it. Doesn't cost any money. None to speak of. Okay? The adventure of a lifetime. Do it, dear listeners. At least 3 times a year. That's it. I'm done. JamesStrongShow@hotmail.com. That's the email address. Send me an email. Send me a Facebook instant message. Put something on Facebook. Get a hold of me however you want. I love to hear from the listeners. Quite a few of you do correspond, more than I ever thought would. And I appreciate it. And I do answer all emails and messages. That's it. We're done. That's it. Until next time, this is James Strong saying adios.